And welcome back everyone. So let's talk about our recipe of the day, the paprika rice. Now the interesting about that recipe is that it uses a technique that's coming from foreign countries and an ingredient like the paprika is also coming from a foreign country. So let's start with the pilaf technique of cooking rice. It is used widely in French cuisine. Almost that you would think it's French, but actually that technique came from the Middle East and dates back from the 10th century, how to cook the pilaf rice. I'll give you all the information on how to make it throughout the video, so do not worry. On the other side, we've got the paprika powder, that you know as that red powder, and do we actually know what it is? Because when I was looking at it for a long time, I was like, well, that's just paprika powder, you know? So in Dutch language, for instance, paprika means bell pepper. And a lot of people think paprika, oh, it's just bell peppers, it's been grounded like red bell peppers. Actually, no. In France, for instance, the paprika powder comes from Hungary, and they are little green sweet chilies that are grounded to make that powder. So interestingly, how we can have all these ingredients that came across the borders and being introduced in French cooking. And people in France have been using them and mixing them like this recipe to create interesting stuff. So we use one technique from another country, the pilaf technique, and again using these building blocks of French cuisine, we've been adding some paprika in there, and whoop, we got another recipe. This is the really amazing thing about French cuisine. So always think about these building blocks of French cooking, these culinary techniques that you're going to be using and stacking up to make really good dishes over and over again. But that's it for the little history. Let's start the recipe now. Before we start the recipe, let me give you the answer of the last week quiz on the sauté of lamb. So the questions were as follows. What is the simple culinary technique we've used to thicken our sauce? And the answer is the roux, of course. And we've used butter with the leeks and onions and mixed that with flour that has created the thickening agent called roux in French cuisine. Question number 2, what is the main and key difference between the fricassé and the ragout? And they're both dishes. They use meat that is cooked in sauce, but the big difference is the coloration of the meat. The sauté and the ragout always use a colored meat, a browned meat is nicely colored, while the fricassé always has uncolored meat to keep that whitish color. So these were the answers. Now we can start the recipe. Let's go. And welcome everyone, and thanks for joining me again on that cooking tutorial. Today we learn how to make a paprika rice. So we'll start with the ingredients as always. So we're going to be using some water, oil, paprika powder, rice, a bunch of thyme with a bay leaf and an onion. Of course, it would be an addition of butter that we use, a little bit of salt as well. All the ingredients will be listed in the video description. Next is the food preparation. Now, when we make a pilaf rice, or we use the technique of making a pilaf rice, measurement is crucial. And the one thing really to remember when you make a pilaf rice is the amount of rice and the amount of water is really at a certain level. So it's 1 measure of rice for 1.5 measure of water. Okay, so I've got here 200 grams of rice, and I'm going to be using 1.5 times that, which is 300 grams or 300 milliliters of water. And the oil is ready. I've got my paprika powder, 1 tablespoon, and I've thinly diced my onions. Now we can start the recipe. The first step is to preheat our water. So you can take a small pan, you can pour all of the water in. Careful not to spill it anywhere. And we're going to add about a teaspoon of salt and bring this gently to a boil. In the same time, you're going to preheat your oven to 200 degrees Celsius. I'll put the equivalents on Fahrenheit on the screen. Next, we're going to pour the oil in another pan, and this is the pan we're going to be using to cook the rice. And make sure you put it on medium heat and wait until it kind of heats up a little bit before we put the onion in. What I usually do is to add a little bit of onion like this. And you see when they start to sizzle like that, I know it's hot enough, so then you can put all of the onions in. Okay, so you don't want to burn these. We're just going to let them cook gently for just a few minutes. Let's say 2 or 3 minutes. Alright, so I've got a bit of a color going. I'm using olive oil today, by the way, to keep with these foreign flavors. And as soon as the onions are here, 1 tablespoon of paprika, and very quickly, now you don't want to cook or burn the paprika at all, because that can really goes with a bitter taste. So as soon as it's done, you're going to take all of your rice and boom, put everything in. Now once your rice is in like that, you're going to let it absorb the oil for just about 1 minute or so, and then we're going to add the water. Alright, so I've got my pan with all the water, and it's already warmed up. Everything in there. And it's going to come down in a bit, you see, and that's going to allow us to accelerate everything. So you mix it well. Now we've got some boil. And what we're going to add in here is this. And that the bouquet garni with everything. And as soon as this is done, basically, that's it. We're ready to put this in the oven. So before we do so, make sure it boils, then we can turn the heat off. And we're gonna add a paper lid on top of this first. Okay. Plus a lid on. And we're gonna leave this to cook in the oven for about 10 minutes. Yeah? So lid on, and I'm gonna put the pan in the oven and cook it at 200 degrees for 10 minutes. Alright, so it's been 10 minutes, and the pan I had in the oven, which is burning hot, is right here, ready to be opened. And when you see a pan like this on the stove, the first thing comes to your mind when there's a handle like that, you think, oh, let me grab it with my hands. Except that this was just in the oven and it's absolutely burning hot. So I'm going to give you a little tip to avoid burning yourself over and over again. So if you're the one cooking and you cook a lot with things like that full of stainless steel and you put this in the oven and you forget it's hot, what I do, and this is an old trick from old kitchens, take a bit of flour and throw a bit of flour like this. Tell yourself, every time you see that, that's a big red flag. Okay, your pan is massively hot, don't touch it, okay? A little tip of the day. And now let's open the pan and see how the rice looks. I always like this kind of surprise opening. Okay, so that's the, it's hot, you see what I was saying? And again, don't be tempted to hold the pan with this thing. Always, use a little thing like that. I'm holding the handle with something to protect myself. So I'm going to remove the bouquet garni. And check the rice, you see? No more water. You see at the bottom here. And my rice is nice and done. So the final touch, we're going to add a little bit of butter to make it nice and shiny. And we're all done. Now, how does that look compared to a standard white rice? This is beautiful. I love it. I absolutely love, look at this color. It's a nice, simple rice, but there's tons of flavor. If you want, you can have a sprinkle of coriander, to maybe a bit more Asian, or a sprinkle of parsley on top like that, to make it more fun, but it's not absolutely necessary. Now let's have a taste. It's nice and shiny. This is so much better than your straightforward rice, and it's so easy to make. The paprika really adds something. It's that kind of onion taste with that paprika taste. If you like paprika powder, it's a great little addition. And really what I love about this is that it is absolutely foolproof. If you are someone at home that cannot make rice, now with this technique, you will become the queen or the king of rice making at home. You cannot fail by using this measurement. 1 measure of rice for 1.5 measure of water. Now, word of warning, this best work with basmati or jasmine rice. And if you use this technique honestly, you're gonna do great thing. You can also improvise this, the rice with more different spices. You can add little pieces of meat if you want. Use your imagination and flavor your rice and stop the boring white rice. I think that's my recommendation, but here's the paprika rice. Looks absolutely beautiful. Wow, that's really amazing how simple things can improve rice. But let's complete the video tutorial of the day, guys. If you've been watching till the end, thank you very much. If you make the recipe, as always, do let me know how you go either in the comment section, and I love to see your pictures on Instagram, #FrenchCookAcademy. Do not hesitate to send me your stuff. It's great to build a community and everyone can see the different variation you may make at home. It's super interesting. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can. Of course, I've got a website FrenchCookingAcademy.com, and now I'm starting a new automated kind of newsletter that will send you automatically the videos I make every week to your inbox so you don't miss everything. If you want to sign for that up, go on my website. You can also become a patron, and I'd like to thank all the new patrons that came. Thank you very much. That keeps the channel independent, and it's super important. As for me, I'll leave you with this picture, and I'll see you all next time for another French cooking tutorial. Take care all, bye bye.